Scripture reading this evening will be from Genesis chapter 2, verses 21 through 24. Genesis 2, 21 through 24. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed up the place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man he made into a woman, and brought her to the man. Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man will leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." You may be seated.
Each year when we take our youth mission trip, the last few times we've gone to Colorado, and one of the days we get to go up to Evergreen, Colorado, and we spend a little bit of time there in town. If you've ever been to Evergreen, it's just this beautiful little town there in the mountains. It feels like, if you've never been to the mountains, like it's really far up in the mountains. It's just barely in, and so it gives you a good taste of mountain life without having to actually do any significant climbing, which is perfect for a youth group. And one of the best parts about going to Evergreen is there's a river that runs through Evergreen, and the youth kids like to take off their shoes and socks, and they will walk in the river. It's, it comes up about the middle of their calf, and they go out there and walk. And I really enjoy it because they all fall. I know. That's why I do what I do. Just kidding. Every time they'll take their shoes and socks off, and they'll step in, and they'll all start pretty, careful, and then you get to a point where you're like, I got this, and then they'll hit a rock that's slippery, and they'll go down. And I've got my camera out, and I like to take pictures of those things, and if you want to see any, come see me. Balance is something that's important, and sometimes we don't realize how much we need balance until we hit a slick spot, and it's too late. And we have been, on Sunday nights, we've been working through a series on marriage, and for some of us, when we get married, feel pretty good about what we're doing, feel pretty comfortable, and we're working our way through this new life, and suddenly we have a child, yeah, and you hit that slick spot, and you realize, wow, I am not as balanced as I thought I was, and down you go. Tonight we are going to talk about the topic that fell to me. Just bear with me here. I chose it. We're going to talk about balance. How do you find balance as a parent and a spouse? I told the staff a couple weeks ago, I feel a little bit like Nicolas Cage teaching an acting class. A little in over my head. Not sure if I'm the right guy for this, but the reason I chose this topic is because for those of you who do have kids living at home, I want you to know I'm right there with you. I'm in the trenches. I know what it's like to try to find that balance between being a good spouse and being a good parent, because both take a lot of work and a lot of time. Carrie and I were married for 7 years before we had Darcy, and they were really good years. We really enjoyed our 7 years of just her and I. We got to grow a lot. We became, like Dale talked about 2 weeks ago, we became really good friends. And Darcy was born, and let me just tell you, we have loved our life with Darcy and Penny, but it is drastically different than the life that Carrie and I lived when it was just her and I. And so tonight we're going to spend some time talking about how we find that balance when we have children. Some of you have already checked out because you're like, I don't have kids. Some of you back in this section are like, I'm not even married. I'm not even thinking about getting married yet. Some of you have already had kids and they're long gone. I understand that when you have a topic that's this specific, some of us may feel like, this is not for me. I hope you'll hang with me because some of you, this will be you at some point. Some of you, I hope, will use these things to be a resource for those in our congregation who are at this point. And for all of us, I hope that there are some principles and some truths within the things that we're going to talk about that are applicable to every stage of our Christian life. Just a second ago, Mark read for us from Genesis chapter 2, this bond that we have as spouses when we become married. It talks about becoming one flesh. And many of us can remember the unity, that oneness that you experience when you first get married. It's new, and it's exciting, and it's fresh, and you do feel one and connected, and you feel that unity. But sometimes, like I said, when we have children, it seems to disrupt that a little bit. Let me just throw out a couple of notes before we get too far into this. Number one, I'm going to speak in a lot of generalities tonight. I know that everything I'm talking about, just because you have kids, doesn't mean you are struggling with these same things. I get that. But hopefully some of this will make sense for some of you. Number two, I don't want this to sound like I'm slamming children. For those of you who are kids listening, Darcy was really excited that Daddy was preaching tonight. She's probably not feeling so excited about that anymore. I love you. Me and Mommy love you. This is not a sermon where I talk about like, oh man, it's brutal having kids. You know, it's the worst. Having children is a blessing. Psalm chapter 127, verses 3 and 4 talks about how much of a blessing it is to have children. And I do believe that. I would not trade anything in the world for Darcy and for Penny. Verses 3 and 4 even say that like arrows in the hand of a warrior, that's what children are like. That's good. I just have really good aim, so I'm just going to stick with 2 arrows. That's enough. Some of you are like, I'm going to load up. I'm going to have as many arrows as I can. That's great. I've been practicing my aim, too. It's good. But they are a blessing. And so this is not a lesson in which I am saying, hey, it's just really hard having kids. If you don't have kids yet, avoid it because it makes marriage a lot harder. It is a blessing, but it can be a challenge if we don't approach it the right way. And so tonight what I want to do is start by looking at a couple different approaches I think people take to their marriage when they have children. A couple of them that I think are the wrong approach, and then one that I think is the approach that we should take. And then after that, I'm going to hopefully just give you a few practical things for your marriage that can help. Again, I'm not an expert. This afternoon reminded me of that. There's nothing like sitting down and trying to look over your sermon about finding balance as a father and a husband with your children there in the same room. And like, you can't give in because today is the day you're going to talk about these things. So please, this is not me preaching at you. This is me, for those of you who are parents, walking alongside you and saying, hey, I get it. I'm there too. Let's see what God's word has to say about it. Okay, so let's look at a couple approaches that I think some people take when it comes to their marriage. Number one, you have the child-centered approach. Life's going fine, boom, there's a baby, and you cannot help it. I mean, if you have had a newborn child, you know there's no way around it. At least for a while, that child is the center of everything you do. Even if you don't want it to be that way, it's that way. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm sleeping just fine. Oh, baby's hungry. Baby's going to wake me up. Dad, I'm still here. Babies are kind of divas, and that's okay. That's all they know. And so because of how children come into the world, some of us fall straight into that child-centered approach, but then we never leave it. It's, okay, my child is the focus of everything. The child. And as our children get older, guess what? Well, my child is still the focus of everything. And early on, that may be necessary. Obviously, my kid can't get up and get herself food when she is a newborn. But a point comes when we in our marriage have to say, look, not everything, the kids, teens, plug your ears, not everything in life is about my kids. I know that seems cold. Some of you may already be like, oh man, I'm pulling him aside. I'm pulling him aside after this. He needs to know that children are a blessing from God. We do everything we can for them. And that is absolutely true. We should do everything we can to take care of our children. But do you know that passage in Genesis chapter 2 when it talks about the unity that we have a spouse? Do you know how that changes after we have children? How that promise changes? It doesn't. That oneness, that one flesh that we experience as a couple when we are first married, after we have kids, it's still supposed to be that way. And so for those of us who have adopted the child-centered approach, some of us find that, wow, I don't feel recognized anymore. Life was really good. It was just the two of us, and now we have this child, and I kind of feel like I'm just the person in the background that's like, what about me? And as we go throughout our life, everything is just us pouring into our children, just pouring into our kids. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 through 33. You don't need to turn over there, but it talks about the love that we have in a marriage, and it compares it to the love that Christ has for the church. We should, as husbands, love our wife the same way that Christ loved the church. And I don't think you could ever describe Christ's love for the church as a neglectful love. He neglects us. He doesn't. He gives us everything that he can. He gave his own life for us. And so as spouses, even when we have children, our love for one another should mirror that of what Christ has for the church. And so husbands, yes, I realize you've got kids. And kids need to eat. And kids need, also they need clothes and they need to get to school. Your spouse is still there. We need to make sure that we are not becoming so child-centered that we forget our spouse and that they take a back seat. Here's some questions. So this book title, I love it. Because I'm not an expert, I was looking at some different resources, and I found this book called For Better or for Kids. That was their title. That was not mine. I love kids. It's this book by a couple, Peter and Ruth Schwink. It's actually a great resource. Some of the stuff that I mentioned tonight comes out of this book because they really do a good job about talking about that balance. But one of the things that they point out is that this idea of a child-centered approach. And here are some questions that they had that we can ask ourselves to find out if we have become too child-centered in our relationship. Do you often feel too busy, overcommitted, or worn out because of your child's activities? Do you ever feel as if your children have too few responsibilities because you and your spouse are doing it all? I'd like to talk to Carrie about this one. I think Penny should be pulling her weight a little bit more. She's 4 now, all right? Do you and your spouse struggle to find time for date night because of your child's activities? Do you ever feel that your needs and desires are neglected because of the attention your spouse gives to your child? Do you ever feel as if most, if not all, of your communication with your spouse is about the kids instead about each other? True story. Last night, Carrie and I went to dinner, just Carrie and I. And on our way home, she said, "Do you realize what happened at dinner?" And I said, "No." She said, "We didn't talk about the kids." And I was like, "What do we talk about?" For us, that's exciting. Now, I'm not saying you can't ever talk about your kids, but for some of you, you look at your marriage and you realize it's child-driven. What do the kids need? What do the kids want? What do the kids want to do? What activities are they involved in? Everything is just pour into the kids, pour into the kids, pour into the kids. And because of that, we lose that balance. And just like a youth kid making their way across the river, we feel really good, and then we hit that slick spot and we're down. The child-centered approach is not the right approach. Love your kids, give all you can to your kids, but they should not be the center of everything in your life. Swing back the other way. Many of us, not by choice, but just naturally have adopted the self-centered approach. Marriage, right? It's whatever I need. It's not about my kid. It's what do I need? I'm exhausted, so here's the kids. And hey, thank you so much, but I've had a long day at work, and so I'm going to need you to take care of that. And we forget about the fact that maybe she's been at home with them all day, and she might be a little more exhausted than you. The self-centered approach says, what about my needs only? Like, whatever I need. I have found that the times in life where I get most frustrated with my kids has nothing to do with what they're doing, has nothing to do with their behavior. It is all about something that I want to be doing, and I am not getting to do it. Something comes on, Sports Center. Oh, this is what I've been waiting on. Kids, just a second. I want to find out why the Denver Broncos are never going to get Deshaun Watson. Give me a second. And Darcy walks in. "Daddy, listen to my sight words." And I'm like, "Oh, Darcy, I'm so glad you're smart. I just need 1 second." It's like kids just know. They're like, "Daddy's doing something? We can fix that." But those are the times we tend to get most frustrated because I realize there's something I want and my child is getting in the way of that. And so if you have adopted this self-centered approach, you're going to get frustrated in life. Because guess what? Your kids, whether they are young like my kids or they're teenagers, they take a lot of work, and that's okay, and we should be willing to pour our time into that. Ephesians 5, again, it talks about Christ. We love each other the way that Christ loved the church. Did Christ make sacrifices? Absolutely. Philippians 2, verses 3 through 8 talks about Christ putting the needs of us before his own desires. And that's what we're called to do as parents. That's hard, that's challenging, but we're not going to find that balance in life with a self-centered approach. I know, that's the one where we'll go, well, duh. But unfortunately, I think many of us, that's kind of the approach we've taken. Okay, so some of you are following along, you're like, okay, well, if it's not the child-centered approach and it's not the self-centered approach, then it must be spouse-centered. Everything focuses on them. Some of you are excited because you're bumping your spouse right now, like, see, you're supposed to focus on me. You are going with option 2 again. You've just tried to call it something else. The approach that we should be taking is a God-centered approach. It's all what Dale talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. It's not about making me the center or my kids the center or even my spouse the center of what we do. It is God becoming the driving force for everything we do in our family. And we will find that when God is what we are striving after, the other things tend to take care of themselves. When I am a better Christian, I am going to be a better husband. And when I am a better Christian, I am going to be a better father, just naturally. I think some of us pour so much time into trying to be a good parent that we neglect being a good spouse. And some of us pour so much time into trying to be a good spouse that we neglect being a good parent. And really, God's like, hey, if you'll just seek me, if you'll just seek after the things that I've called you to seek after, those other things, they're going to work out. And I mean, that's applicable to anything. If you want to be a better employee at work, be a better Christian. You want to be a better friend, be a better Christian. If you seek God, those things will take care of yourself. And when you look at the passages throughout Scripture that talk about parenting, God is at the center of all of them. The great passage in Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9 that talks about, instilling these things in your kids and teaching them. Guess what? It's talking about God, instilling those things in their life. Ephesians 6:4. I do find this interesting. I was looking for as many passages as I could in the New Testament that specifically address fathers and the way that they should interact with their kids. And I found 2 passages, and both of them say the same thing. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. And I'm like, I think there was a translation error, and it's supposed to be flipped, kids, but I think they knew what they were doing when they put that together. But fathers, do not exasperate your children, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. Every passage you find about parenting isn't just, here's some good advice on how to be a good dad or how to be a good mom. It is, here is how to be a godly parent. God should be the center of everything we do. And when God is not the center of your family, you are going to find things are not balanced. When God's not the center, you will find that you're not a great spouse and you're not a great parent because you can't seem to find that even place in the middle. And so I'm going to try to give you a couple of practical things that hopefully will help you in your marriage when it comes to striking a balance. But I'm just telling you, until God is the driving force behind everything that you do in your family, these other things I'm going to tell you are good. They may help. But it's like putting a bandage over a missing arm. It's like a little Band-Aid. Here you go. It's not going to help, all right? And so these are good practical things, but first and foremost, God needs to be the center of everything we do. Okay, so here are some practical helps that will hopefully help you guys out for those of you who are like me and are working on these things in your own life. Number 1, parent as a team. You're a team. Okay, you are raising your children together. And I know all too well that sometimes it feels like, all right, I'm doing my thing, and Carrie's doing her thing. We've got these kids. It kind of feels like a tag team match. Like I stand on the outside, and the kids beat Carrie up for a while, and then I'm like, all right, tag me in. Tag. She hops out, I hop in. They beat me up for a while. Carrie, where'd you go? And that's how some of us do. Moms, you're at home with the kids. Dad comes home, tag, you're it. Oh, okay. Dad gets beat up. All right, tag. Look, I get that there are times where mom needs a break and dad is away. And so parenting is sometimes you're on your own. But parenting should take place as a team. Like, you're on the same side. You are trying to work together to raise your kids. And so parenting as a team means a couple different things. Number one, it means you need to be on the same page when it comes to parenting your children. Teenagers, I feel like Dale got us started on giving you guys advice for the future, so I'm going to give you some advice. As you look for a spouse, I know no one, when they're dating and they found the love of their life and they feel the butterflies in their stomach, want to be like, so what are your parenting techniques? Because girls, that's going to scare the guy. I'm just going to tell you that. He's going to be like, what? I'm not having children, ever. But at some point before you have children, ideally, you should talk about, what is parenting going to look like in this house? How are we going to discipline? And like, how do we handle certain situations that arise? Now, I'm finding that no matter how much you prepare, things are always going to happen. You're like, I don't remember sitting and talking about this. But you need to have those conversations, ideally, before. Some of you are like, thanks a lot, it's too late. And we're not on the same page. And it may mean sitting down and having some difficult conversations in which you say, like, we're not parenting together. I'm doing it one way, and you're doing it one way. Maybe one of you feels like this disciplinarian, and the other one is like, it's more like a good cop, bad cop, right? And it's like, I've been given the old wait till dad gets home. I understand that. Dad was scarier, you think, until mom goes over the edge, and then mom's scarier. Mom, if you're watching, I also love you and my kids. It means, though, that there's not one parent and then one buddy. There's not one parent and then one breadwinner. Well, I'm working. I've got the job, and so I just don't have time. No, you are a team. You may have different roles. You may do different things. I get that. But you are parenting as a team. I'm just telling you, raising kids is hard. I'm only 5 years in, and it's tough work. It's good. It is a good kind of hard, but it is challenging. And the last thing you need in your relationship is an enemy, someone who's not on your team. I'm trying to raise my kids. She's trying to raise our kids, and we're just doing our best. Okay? Be a team. Work together. Don't take your frustrations out on your spouse when you're frustrated with your kids. This is something I think I fall into the habit of. I'll get frustrated with what's going on with my kids, and Carrie will come in and she'll try to help, and I'll bite at her, and then I'm like, you know what? She didn't do anything. Honestly, my kids didn't do anything. I'm a mess. Don't do that. That's your teammate. Work together. Parent as a team, all right? Number 2, prioritize your time together as a couple. I am glad that I am married to someone like Carrie, because Carrie is the kind of person that's like, we need to put a date on the calendar. I'm the kind of guy that in the middle of an afternoon, I'm like, oh, we should have gone on a date tonight. She's like, we don't have a babysitter? I'm like, oh, yeah, good point. No, we won't. Carrie's a planner, and so it is great. I'll be at work, and just on the calendar will pop up, date night. I'm like, oh, that's going to be nice. I don't even have to do any work. I don't even have to ask her out. That sounded bad. Carrie, I love you. Anybody got a pen? I need to make a list of some cards I need to send out this week. But for example, yesterday was my birthday. Last night, Carrie and I, we got to go out. We saw Brooke and Patty Landis at Target, and they were like, you chose to come to Target for your birthday? And I said, do you see my kids? I was like, no. I was like, you're right, you don't. As I was leaving, Darcy was sad, and she said, Daddy, why don't you want me and Penny to come to dinner? And I was like, you don't understand. I'm just kidding. I did not say that. And I said, Darcy, I do. I like spending time with you and Penny, but when you're around, I don't get to give Mommy all the attention that she needs. And so when we go out and it's just me and her, we get to just focus on each other. And you know what? She got that. And she's 5. I said, Darcy, you know how sometimes you like to play where it's just me and you and we play a game? Yeah. I said, me and Mommy just need some time to do that. And she goes, okay. Your kids will understand. And if they don't, they need to learn to understand that sometimes you just need time together as a couple. And so you need to prioritize time as a couple. Make date nights. once a month, pick a night. Look, I know finding babysitters are tough, but we got a row back here of, not the next one, sorry boys. We've got a group of youth girls, they'll come babysit for you. And I know babysitting can get expensive. Find another couple with kids and say, hey, this week we'll take your kids, you guys go out. Next week you take our kids. Be the first one. Be the first one to take the kid. You don't want to, but prioritize that. Make a plan. Set a schedule. Don't be the ones that are like, oh, we'll just find time. You have to be intentional with it. Last night was great. And yes, we went to Target, and then we went and ate pizza. And then we went home. And guess what? Maybe we're old and boring, but it was wonderful because it was just nice to sit across the table from Carrie and just talk to her. Not have to worry about the kids are eating their food or if Penny has her pizza in her hair. Just got to talk to each other. That's important. Make sure you find that time. Family time is good. It's special and it's important as well. But you need to spend time alone as a couple. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. Maybe, especially if you have really little ones, maybe it's just sneaking out for an hour. That's okay. Find time that you can be alone. And then third and finally, watch out for each other. You should have your spouse's back. I love my kids, but there are times where my kids go into this mode where they just know mom's on the edge and we know how to push her over the edge. And dads, your job in life should be to say, you know what? I'm going to watch out for her. When my kids decide they're going to push mom over the edge, dad's going to come to the rescue. And so this afternoon, I saw that happening. I was sitting and looking over my lesson, and I was just like, Carrie, why don't you just go back in the bedroom for an hour and just have some private time? And she looked at me like she hadn't looked at me in a long time, like, wow, thank you. There is a good human in there. Carrie is really good at this. She'll just come in and be like, hey, do you want to go for a run? And I'm like, yeah. I do. She's like, go for a run. She'll be like, hey, have you hung out with your buddies in a while? I'm like, no. She's like, you should call them up, see what they're doing tonight. Yeah, that's awesome. I would love to do that. We should do that for our spouse. Look out for each other. Don't wait until they've hit rock bottom and like, oh, you look like you need a nap. Why don't you go catch a 15-minute snooze? Help! That's usually how it goes. Carrie hears the kids screaming from the outside. I'm like, you put some headphones in or something. But we need to watch out for each other. That means allowing them time alone, encouraging them to spend time with friends. Like, hey, go out with the girls, go out with the guys. Reminding them that it is okay to say no to certain opportunities. Some of us have a spouse that just maybe burdens themselves with things they don't need. And to say, hey, you don't have to do that. Say no. It may be just giving them time to relax or exercise, just taking on a responsibility that's usually on their plate. You should see your spouse and say, I want to look out for them. I want to do what I can to make life a little bit easier for them. This is not a, hey, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. I know couples that are point keepers. It's the old, hey, if I do enough good, I'm going to build up points, and then I'll be able to cash, like it's Chuck E. Cheese, and I've won all these. I'm like, I'm here to cash these in for one movie night. This doesn't work that way. Then you become bitter with one another. Don't do these things because you're trying to get something good down the road. Do it because you care about your spouse, you care about their well-being, and you're trying to take care of them. And so, hey, why don't you take the afternoon, go do something. I'll stay home with the kids. Dads, I know for some of you, just the idea of staying home with your kids for a couple hours is a terrifying thought. It shouldn't be, though. It shouldn't be. Luckily, I grew up in a home where my dad's job was flexible, and so he was at home a lot. And there were times where it was just dad, and there were times where it was just mom. But I know not everybody grew up in a family like that. I know some of us grew up in a home. Dad came home from work. He sat down. He ate his dinner. Spend a lot of time with dad. And again, like if that's how your family was, that's okay. But it's still good for you to say, hey, honey, why don't you go? I'll be at home with the kids. I may barely survive, but I'll stay at home with the kids, and you don't worry about it. You go for a little bit. Because if we don't watch out for each other, who's going to? You need to look at your spouse and say, I need to take care of their needs. I need to make sure that they're getting the things that they need to. You know what happens with kids eventually, right? They grow up and they move out, right? Some of you are what we call empty nesters. Your kids have grown up and they have moved out. And do you know what happens if you create a family structure that is child-centered? Kid leaves. Hi, I'm Jeremy. Nice to meet you. I think I live with you. Our whole purpose is now gone. And now I'm sitting at this house with this person that I've been married to, but we've been doing something else and not really focusing on this. And so unfortunately, you have a lot of people who have poured so much into their kids that when the kids finally leave the house, they don't even know each other anymore. I don't know this person. We never spend time together. We never pour any effort into one another. And so I just don't know what to do. Make sure that doesn't happen down the road by making an effort to build up your relationship now so that when the kids are gone, you can enjoy that time together. And you don't have to feel like you're starting from scratch. Well, I guess we better date again because I don't even know you. And at the same time, if your life is self-centered, the same thing's going to happen. Your kids are going to leave, and sure, you're going to think like, oh, this is great. The kids are gone. My freedom is back. And your spouse is going to be like, you know what? You haven't really taken care of me and my needs over the years. And so make sure that your marriage is the kind that is God-centered, so that as you grow in your faith, you're going to grow as a spouse, and you're going to grow as a parent. Again, I know that some of these things, for some of you, it's just not applicable to the point in your life that you're at right now. I get that. But hopefully the theme that sticks with all of us is the importance of having God at the center of everything we do. Whether that's talking about your marriage and your family life or just talking about your life in general, if God is not the center of everything we do, we're going to struggle. We're going to struggle to find balance. You will never be the employee or spouse or parent or friend that you could be if you were a better Christian. And so find ways to make sure that God is guiding everything in your life. And especially for you young couples who have children, or for you couples who have older kids in their teenage years, it's not too late. In a couple weeks, Tim is going to talk about the fact that it's not too late. It's never too late. You may feel like I'm at a point where I've tried and we've fallen. Just start again. That may mean some tough conversations as a couple where we say, look, we've just not been doing this the way that we need to do it, and let's sit down and talk through some of that so that we can move forward the way that we need to. If God has not been the center of your marriage, it's time to make him that way. And if God has not been the center of your life, it's time to make him the center of your life as well. Tonight we want to offer an invitation, whether you are struggling with some of the things we've been talking about or you've got other things that you're dealing with right now, or tonight is the night that you want to put Christ on in baptism. We want to give you that opportunity to do that as we stand and Scott leads us in this song.